Not everyone is like me. Not everyone knows that they want to be a mum. It's okay to think you don't want children and then change your mind. However, how would it feel if you did change your mind, knowing that you can't have children? Intrigued? Then sit back, relax, and listen to find out. On this episode, I'm joined by Juliet Owen-Nuttall, who thought motherhood wasn't for her. It wasn't until the doctors told her she couldn't that she started to realise that maybe she did want to be a mum. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My guest today is Juliet. Thanks, Juliet, for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So here is the question that quite a few of my guests say is the most difficult to answer. Who is Juliet?
Who's Juliet? I'm a mix of many things. I'm a mum and I'm very ambitious at the same time. So I am a fertility wellbeing practitioner, but I also call myself like a woman's health expert as well, because I really specialize in hormones. I also am writing, and I run a pub. So I am really good at organising stuff. So we have a festival running in July, which is like a fringe festival, which is very similar to Edinburgh Festival. So I'm booking all the acts on that. So I am very much like everything. I also love cooking. I love animals, and I love my family. And yeah, we get to do it all together, which is the most important thing to me. So yeah, there's lots and lots of things to me.
Oh my word. So let's start delving into more of who you are, and let's take it back. I'm going to say, let's take it back to the beginning. Did you always know that you wanted to be a mum?
No, I didn't. And that is where the journey starts, really. I guess I've always been really ambitious, and I hit my 30s. I became a female firefighter, and children were not on my wavelength at all. In fact, I could have quite easily said never. But I guess a lot of women say their body clock starts to tick, and mine did, but I wasn't in a relationship. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to do then. I remember hitting this point of like, well, hang on a second, maybe you need to look at this. But when I was 41, I had a major infection in my womb, and I'd also had a lot of issues in my menstrual health, which kind of led me to think I don't want children, and things weren't right. So but when I had the diagnosis of you will never have children, you'll never get pregnant naturally, we're going to give you a hysterectomy because that's the best solution, it rang something in my head of, do you really want to miss this opportunity of motherhood? But then I was faced with, you're too old, you've missed the boat, time's run out, your menopause is just around the corner. So that set me on a journey, and that set me on the biggest journey of my life. So understanding what had been going on in my body, my hormones out of whack, and understanding on a deep spiritual level why I actually had been putting off children. And once I uncovered that, I became pregnant, and I also understood why my subconscious was stopping me from wanting to have children. So there was like this need of, there was something saying it's dangerous, don't do it. But once I released that, I was like, oh, I do want children, and this could be possible.
So knowing your story, and that was like a brief summary, really, wasn't it? From the moment of you being a firefighter and that being your job to the moment you actually found out you were pregnant, lots of things happened to you. Your life during those times was not simple.
No, 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 not at all. So we had moved abroad. So when I met Daniel, I also had given up firefighting because I had PTSD. And so I felt that it wasn't, there were many, many factors in that, in the way in which women were treated in the fire service. I do hear now it's slightly different, but back then women were not treated very well in the fire service, and definitely our mental, emotional well-being was not supported. And that, I believe, did contribute to my infertility. Not that I'm saying that the job did, but just the circumstances. And as I help women, there's a common theme that runs where women over push their bodies and it affects their hormones. And then when I met Daniel, we decided that we needed a huge change in life, and we needed to, it was just like, it was this it, both of us were like, is this it? So we moved abroad, we moved to Costa Rica, and there our whole world fell apart. We lost all our money, we were scammed, my health deteriorated, and I was close to, very close to kind of dying out there because I was in such a poor state of health. And living in a third world country, you've got no support, medical support, so my health was deteriorating dramatically. And then once I came back from there, we had to rebuild our life. I lost my father, so it was like literally ground zero, building my life back up, and then going on a very deep spiritual, physical, mental, emotional journey to motherhood. And it was not easy. I went through lots of challenges. So, but it made me as a person, it made me the mum I am today. It made me the businesswoman I am today. It made me, the wife I am today. So, I am grateful. Everybody says that when we go through these things, like it feels like the whole world is falling apart, but actually it's being done for us, because going on that trajectory, I wouldn't have been the person I am today.
So take us from the moment where, the doctors are saying to you, that's it. As far as getting pregnant and having a child is concerned, that's not going to be in your life. Where'd you go from there? What did you do? What were you thinking? And then what did you do so that, like, you now have a beautiful daughter? What happened?
Well, I'd be perfectly honest, and I talk about this a lot because even I have been in the personal development arena, know all the mindset stuff. I'm NLP trained, I'm Chinese medicine trained. I put my head in the sand for 2 years, and I was in denial because it was such a huge shock, and I also lost my father at the same time, so I was in a lot of grief. And I always say to people, yes, I was grieving my father, but I was also grieving something that I didn't know how to grieve, which is being told that you will never have children. And so then I'm trying to deal with, what do I do? Where do I go from here? I had a lot of pressure from family, take the surgery, be done with it, because I was in a lot of pain. I was having cyst bursts every month. I had a lot of scarring. From this infection, I had my right side I have no right ovary, and my tubes are blocked, and there was a lot of scar tissue, and there's a lot of scar tissue. Well, there was a lot of scar tissue in my womb. So all that was causing me a lot of pain. So, the doctor says, cut it out, get rid of it. But fortunately for me, Daniel kept saying, but that's not the route to go. Like, he kept reminding me that's not the route to go. You know, why would you cut something out? It's not broken, but the medical profession deemed it as broken. So I guess it was, I had to pick myself back up, and I was in the lowest point of my life ever. And so I had to just find, you know, just take a step each day and pick myself up. And then one day, Daniel and I had been chatting, and we both said, well, I don't think children are off, not completely off the menu. So we were talking about, well, what could we do? So we were like, well, we could foster, we could adopt. So it started my thinking pattern and process to, okay, well, what does life look like with children? And then I started to become aware of thoughts and feelings around what motherhood looked like for me, and my greatest fears around motherhood. And it then started me on a journey. And that was my journey to discovering what was going on, what had been going on. So I started with physical, because my health was in a poor state. So I started to kind of look at, well, okay, in Chinese medicine, the symptoms are this. What could that be? And I went deeply into it. And then I started to realize my hormones were massively out of balance. And they had been my entire life. And I had been going to doctors about my menstrual issues. Partly it was my doing, because I had eating disorders from about age 14. So it affected my hormones, affected my body. I didn't menstruate for 10 years. So I had to undo all of that. And then I looked at, you know, my health and my hormones, and that started to regulate. And interestingly, the pain went. And I was like, okay, so the pain's gone. And that's really interesting. So what am I doing? What have I done? And the symptoms went, you know, and I am now symptom free from that moment after regulating my hormones. You know, those symptoms of my cyst bursting, the pain, I don't have it anymore. But then, of course, because of my training and because of, you know, what I know, I then thought, there's something else going on here as well. So we had to look at the energetic part, the mental part, and then we started to dive deeply into what was going on. And I realized I just had this belief in my head of, I don't want to have children because I don't want to become the mum that my mum was. And it wasn't that, you know, I had a particularly bad childhood, but for the person I am, being brought up in the family that I was, it wasn't entirely supportive of the type of person I am. So then I realized I had said, I don't want to create that for my child. And at that point, up until that point, I didn't understand that I could really change that, and I could really decide and break generational patterns and decide what I wanted. Because also the framework that I had been given was pretty much every woman in my family, once they had children, their life, from my eyes, looked like it was over. They just became mums. And that was my greatest fear. I was like, I don't want to lose all those other parts of me. And, you know, when I talked about that, there's lots of parts of me. I don't want to lose those parts of me. So how do I combine the two? Because nobody's shown me that you can. All they've shown me is you have children, that's it. So I had to really, really think very, very carefully about, well, what does life look like with children? What do I want? How do I want this to be? So I started to become more mindful of how I wanted to have children and what life would look like. So once I started to get clarity, it felt, so I talk about it sort of in my subconscious, it felt safe. It felt safe to have children, and that's when it happened. And then I became pregnant. But the journey then wasn't all like amazing. I suffered massively from prenatal depression, postnatal depression, because still you know, although I'd unpicked some of it, I had to go deeper into the trauma of my childhood and dealing with really what was going on in my subconscious. So it led me to go even deeper. And I had a lot of bonding and attachment issues with my daughter because I didn't have that with my mum. I still don't. There's no bond. And it was really important to me to have a bond with my daughter. And so I had to work on bonding issues whilst pregnant, because whilst I was pregnant, I felt completely detached. There was like this, it felt like there was this thing in my belly that I was not connected to. And I didn't want to be connected to. And that scared me massively, because I said, I don't understand. I've got this baby that I've always wanted, but I don't love it. And I don't want it. And I want to harm this baby. And why is that happening? So, so then I went even deeper into what was going on psychologically, which is why I can really help women that are ambitious, that have put kids off, because I know that there's some very deep psychological frameworks in there that are stopping them, because there's certain character types that put ambition because they want to be seen. But motherhood and nurturing is like it's like it's something that they don't want, but they do want, and they don't know how to combine the two. So yeah, that was the journey.
Yeah, you've been on a very, it's interesting in the sense of you've gone through a process of not wanting to get pregnant because, like you said, because of the beliefs that you developed. Then when that shock happens where you're told, well, actually it's game over, you're not going to become pregnant, it feels like, from what you're saying, that was the trigger that made you think, well, hang on a second, is that true? Is that something? And then, like you said, you did the work to understand, well, what was stopping you? Why was your body reacting in that way to sort of protect you from getting pregnant? Because you had this belief that you didn't want to be pregnant. And then, having done the work and become pregnant, there's then that, like you said, not being able to bond with your baby. So talk to me more about that. What was it? How did you then get that connection?
It wasn't really until she was born, and I had a lot of professional help. You know, I've talked about this because it's very important, because there's a load of shame attached, and that women sit in the shadows and don't talk about it. And it's very important that we do talk about it, because it can then have a huge impact on the early life stages of the child. And you know, bonding is one of the most important things for stability of a human being. And if they don't have that, it will then, you know, as I've experienced in my life, it will then have this snowball effect later on in your life, and it will keep going. So it was very important to me to understand what was going on. But, you know, I had a lot of professional help. I had a lot of support. I had a psychologist, and I had a huge amount of support from Daniel, who just literally held my hand the whole way. And when it came to it, we had this plan for when I was going to give birth, and we had this meeting at the hospital, because my greatest fear was, well, if I give birth, and then what do I do? You know, and they were saying, look, it's really important that the baby has skin on skin, and that the baby feels, you know, protected the minute the baby comes out. So Daniel was like, right, if she doesn't want the baby near her, I'll do it. Oh, that's my job. So we worked as a unit to create, you know, this kind of scenario that would help my baby, even if I wasn't mentally capable or wanted to. Yeah, I mean, I had loads and loads of support. You know, most people, like, they you know, they get all excited, they get all the baby stuff. I didn't want baby stuff near me. And it was about the week before I think I was due, I said, I said to I had like a support, I don't know, I call her my angel. I mean, she was just heaven sent. She was incredible. She literally was, you know, this person that we would go for walks and we would just talk really frankly about motherhood and everything. And I think she was a trained psychologist as well, so she would be understanding what I'm saying. And she said, "Okay, you ready for baby stuff?" And I went, "Okay, I think so." It was about a week before I got the baby stuff. But you know, most people are like, you know, they do the nursery and everything, and I was just like, no, I don't want anything to do with it. And it was just so strange to me, because I was like, I don't understand this yearning for a child, and then I don't want the child. But yeah, I mean, you know, the support I had just, it held me through it. But the minute she was born by cesarean, and they just handed her to me, and I just went, oh, and that was it. It was just love at first sight. And we literally we literally haven't been apart. You know, she sleeps with me, we've got a lovely bond, you know, and it's so important to me, and to give her that bond and to receive that bond as well. You know, she's a very cuddly individual. She's very tactile. She wants my love and affection, and she gives that to me too. And it's like this healing process that we've been through, to, you know, she's helping me heal by giving that to me, by receiving what I never had as a child. um I just, you know, I've kind of asked my mum what happened, but my mum just talks very stoically about, well, you know, we just I think because of what society was teaching women at that time when I was born, um, they didn't breastfeed because it was not deemed as very good. In the 70s, it was like the formula was coming out, so it was, you don't breastfeed. And it was this kind of, a little bit like sleep training. You just leave a baby in the room to cry and it'll suddenly stop. Well, my understanding was, from going deeply into the whole process of what had happened, well, yeah, they stop because no one's coming. So when I was going through it with the psychologist, she said, you know, you stopped crying because no one came. So then you've never been able to voice your needs. And so then, you know, it was partly, the journey was, well, what happens when I go into motherhood? Because I don't know how to voice my needs. And all mothers need help. We need help, you know. So we need to know how to voice that. But because I didn't know how to voice there was this deep fear of, I'll be just consumed. So yeah, this great understanding, and then having the support from Daniel to be, because he always used to say to me, you're so capable, you just do everything yourself. But yes, I do, but that's not actually how the feminine works. She has to ask for help. She's not this superwoman, because that affects her nervous system. So it's showing women that, yeah, you can be this individual that's incredible, you can face the world, but actually that's not how your body's designed. And I completely understand it now, that, you know, you need to ask for help, and your body's not designed in that way. And if you run that pattern, that will have an effect on you physically, and it will affect your fertility. So that's kind of the full circle.
And that's the thing, isn't it? If we go back in time and we look at the male female roles thousands of years ago, they were very specific, in the sense of the man went out and hunted, and the women had a community, and we together were responsible for the community. It's not like now, where we think we have to do everything because community has changed, or we've allowed it to change. And I think sometimes we feel very proud to be superwoman, which is great. However, it's like you've said, we don't and we shouldn't expect to do everything by ourselves. And yet, for some reason, we just do. So you've been on, I mean, you are very self-aware, which is amazing, and everybody should put time into becoming self-aware and knowing themselves. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, it's a really tough one, because I think it would be ask for help, but then I didn't know how. So, and learning to ask for help and not being so kind of self-reliant, that would have changed my trajectory completely. But I didn't know how. And like, when I see people of like 20s and 30s, like we've got staff in our pub, and when I see them and I see their patterns, and I'm like, wow, okay. But it's got to come from the individual. They've got to understand, what their needs are, but often we don't know what our needs are. So yeah, it's very, very difficult, because I would say ask for help, but I didn't know how to do it.
Oh, Juliet. We're coming close to the end of our time together. I have two questions for you, two very important questions before we sign off. The first one is, because we have covered a lot, what 3 things would you like everyone to take away with them from our conversation today?
3 things. I would say, as a female or a feminine, I would say the dynamic that you have between you and your partner is really crucial. And that seeing it as you're not these separate, we are different, male and female are different. But when you realize that you're a unit that works together, it can change everything. So that would be something to look, to kind of look at your relationship and say, where can be a unit, and how can we work as a unit, and in parenthood especially. No matter how busy you are, having a self nurture routine is vital, even if it's 15 minutes. My morning routine used to be maybe an hour and a quarter. It's now 15, 20 minutes, but I still manage to give that to myself. It's so important. And what's the third takeaway? I think health. Hormones play a huge part in how we feel as women, whether we feel we can face the world or not, and how we function, and understanding your cycle throughout the month. That there are certain parts of the cycle where you're invincible, and there are other parts of your cycle where you need to retract, and understanding that and working with it. And I teach women to work with their cycle through their working pattern. It plays a huge role in how you can turn up and not beat yourself up, and understand. And again, it's being kind to yourself and saying, yes, I am feminine, but there are times of the month when I'm invincible, times of the month when I'm not, and that's okay.
And it's very, very okay. So before we wrap up, the last question I have for you is this a question? Yeah, it is a question. Our viewers, our listeners will have been listening going, that Juliet, she's amazing. I need to contact her. I need to connect with her. Make it easy. How do they make that happen?
I'd say the easiest way to connect with me is on Facebook, and it's Juliet Owen-Nuttall. My business is the non-invasive method, so the best way is to get me on Facebook. That's where I'm mostly at.
And that is our time together over. Juliet, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me today and being so open and honest with sharing your story.
You're welcome. I hope it helps people.
I'm sure it will. And thank you everyone for listening and watching. Thank you for listening to this episode of What the Mum. If you enjoyed it, I've just got a little favour to ask you. Go ahead and tell all your mum friends so that more mums can share their stories of motherhood. And also, don't forget to subscribe and come and connect with me. Take care, everyone, and see you at the next episode.